In 2004, a college student named Maura Murray was driving through a remote forested area when her car suddenly slid into a snowbank. Stranded, she got out and called a tow truck. While waiting, she heard unsettling noises coming from the woods, but brushed them off, trying to stay calm. A few minutes go by when a passing motorcyclist stopped to offer assistance, but Maura declined, explaining that help was already on the way. Concerned for her safety, the man still called the police. Before leaving, the man mentioned he had somewhere to be and wished her luck. 10 minutes later, when officers arrived, they found her car abandoned, but Maura had vanished without a trace. Despite an extensive search, no sign of her was ever discovered. To this day, her disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, sparking countless theories. Some believe she was kidnapped, while others suggest she may have run away to start a new life. What do you think happened to Maura?
When I tell you that this is the strangest missing persons case, I 100% mean it. Because not only did he just vanish into thin air, but he ended up dead over 1,600 miles away in a place that he had never been before. Walking down a highway in the middle of the night wearing military fatigues that were not his. He wasn't even in the military. Nobody would know what happened to David Glenn Lewis for 11 years, but really this case is still unsolved. And the circumstances surrounding how he was found are terrifying, so let's talk about it. David Glenn Lewis was 39 years old when he mysteriously disappeared on January 30th, 1993. He lived in Dumas, Texas with his wife and daughter, and he was a former judge now practicing law at a private law firm in Amarillo. He also taught government classes at Amarillo College, and he was pretty involved in the community. He loved going to church with his family, and he played a big role with the Boy Scouts and United Way. But on January 28th, 1993, a series of mysterious events would begin to play out that would forever change his life. So that day, he left work early at his law firm because he didn't feel good. He told his coworkers that he was just going to go home, but after he left, he bought gas for his red Ford Explorer, and then he went to the college where he taught his class until 10 that evening. The next day, his wife and daughter went to Dallas for a weekend shopping trip, but David stayed behind because he was really excited to watch the Super Bowl as his favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys, were playing in it. I guess this was a pretty big deal back then because this was the first time that the Cowboys had been in the Super Bowl in like 14 years, so he was for sure going to be watching it. So his wife and daughter took off, but they didn't see David before they left, and little did they know that when they came back, their lives would never be the same. That day, a member of their church reportedly saw David hurrying through the Southwest Airlines terminal at the Amarillo International Airport. But at the time, nothing was amiss, so it didn't really seem like a big deal. It didn't look like David had any luggage with him though, which was odd. At around 10:30 that night, a police officer who was patrolling downtown Amarillo spotted a red Ford Explorer, just like David's, parked outside of the Potter County Courthouse. By the next morning, it was gone though, so again, it didn't really seem cause for concern. And the next morning, David's car was parked in his driveway like usual. But on Super Bowl Sunday, which was January 30th, a sheriff once again saw a red Ford Explorer parked outside of the courthouse. But this time, he saw a man matching David's description across the street taking pictures of it, which was really weird and stood out to him. But again, a crime hadn't happened yet, so this wasn't really looked into too much. That night, David's wife and daughter returned home, but David was nowhere to be found. What was odd though is that the VCR was still recording, and it looked like it had started recording well before the game. In the fridge were 2 turkey sandwiches ready to be eaten, and there was a load of laundry that had recently been started in the washer. David's wedding ring and watch were found on the counter, and it really did seem like he just stepped out and would be right back. His wife thought that he maybe went to a friend's house to watch the game, and possibly went to the college after to teach his class, since he usually taught late into the night. But by the next day, David still hadn't come home, and then he missed 2 really important work meetings that he normally would never miss. This is when his wife knew something was really wrong and reported him missing to the police. As news of his disappearance spread, a Dallas taxi driver came forward and said that he drove a man who he thought could be David from a hotel to the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. He said that the man seemed really nervous and paid him in cash from a huge wad of $100 bills. It didn't take long for authorities to find David's car, and it was parked right where the sheriff had seen it the day prior, right in front of the courthouse. His keys were under the floor mat inside the car, and also found in the car were his checkbook, driver's license, and 2 gas station credit cards. At this point, authorities didn't really know where this investigation was heading, so they started combing through his bank records and found that either David or someone who had access to his account account had made plans to travel. On the day he was last seen, which was Saturday, January 30th, $5,000 was deposited into his bank account, and to this day, nobody knows who deposited that money. On the day of the Super Bowl, a plane ticket under David's name was purchased from Amarillo to Dallas. It's never been proven if this was actually used, and if it was, nobody knows if it was actually David or someone else claiming to be him. On the day he was reported missing, yet another plane ticket was purchased, this time from Los Angeles to Dallas, and again it was purchased under David's name, but nobody knows if it was actually ever used. All of these odd findings really started to pile up, so police began looking into David's career and personal life to see if anyone had any reason to possibly hurt him. He was a former judge, so he was responsible for putting a lot of bad people away, and his wife did say that during his time as a judge he received so many death threats. And at the time of his disappearance, he had been a defendant in a lawsuit brought against him and several other lawyers and former client. And what's odd is that he was the only one who had yet to be deposed, so his wife wondered if that had anything to do with his disappearance. What's really weird is that when police went to look for his files regarding this lawsuit, they were all missing too. According to David's personal lawyer, this having anything to do with his disappearance seems unlikely, because nobody would have really gained anything from it. His family immediately believed foul play was involved because David had never just left like this, and this was really out of character for him. But police couldn't find any evidence suggesting foul play, and they brought up the fact that David not so long ago had tried to run for the 69th District Court judgeship, but he lost. So they believed that this could have affected him deeper than anyone thought, and they felt that he left willingly and by his own volition. So after a while, they just closed his case. But what nobody saw coming was a mystery over 1,600 miles away in the small town of Moxie, Washington, where a man would turn up dead in the middle of the highway. At around 10:30 p.m. on February 1st, 1993, which is one day after David was reported missing, multiple people driving down the highway in Moxie near the Rivard Road intersection saw a man stumbling down the middle of the road. The man seemed really disoriented, so one driver decided to turn back around to see if they could possibly help, or at the very least warn other drivers to watch out for him. But when he turned around, he found the man dead in the middle of the road. He'd been struck and killed by a car, which took off and fled the scene. The man didn't have any identification on him, and he was wearing old military-style camouflage fatigues and work boots. The witness reported seeing a Chevy Camaro speed off, but whoever that person was never came forward, and their car was never found. It wasn't clear if this man had been intentionally hit or if it was just a tragic accident since it was dark and he was standing in the middle of the highway. But whoever killed him has never been found. An autopsy was performed, and the cause of death was revealed to be from the trauma caused by getting hit by a car, but no alcohol or drugs were found in his system. This man was eventually listed as the Moxie John Doe, and his identity would remain a mystery for 11 years, as would David's disappearance. But then in 2004, a Washington State Patrol detective in the Yakima area began reading an article about investigating long-term missing person cases, and this made him think of the Moxie John Doe. Moxie is a really small rural community, and I actually grew up there and went to high school in the area, and so when something like a hit and run to this magnitude happens, it kind of sticks with you. So the detective started Googling cases of missing men who were the same height and weight as the Moxie John Doe. Within 1 week, he was able to compile a list of a dozen possible matches, one of which was David Glenn Lewis. The detective then found David's photo online, and he strongly resembled the Moxie John Doe. But the only difference was that David always wore these really distinctive glasses, but the John Doe wasn't wearing any at the time he died. But then he remembered that WSP had kept everything found at the hit-and-run scene in evidence since 1993, so he decided to go back and take a look. When he was searching through the military fatigues, he found something that made his jaw drop, and it was a pair of very distinctive eyeglasses. This was enough for him to reach out to the Amarillo police, and after conducting a DNA test, it came back as a match. The Moxie John Doe was in fact David Glenn Lewis, and his identity was officially solved 11 years later. But this really only brought so many more questions, and the mystery was far from over. The biggest question was how David got from Amarillo to Moxie, Washington, and what exactly was he doing there? He had no connections there, and he didn't know anyone there, let alone Washington State in general. This is over 1,600 miles away from his home, and there are no direct flights between the two cities. If he drove, it would have taken him around 24 hours non-stop, but his car was found in Amarillo the day he was reported missing, so if he did drive, he definitely didn't take his own car. By the time that he was officially dead, he'd only been missing for 2 days. It's so heartbreaking to know that the entire 11 years that he was missing, he had been dead the entire time. Another major question is what he was wearing the night he died. He was found in old military-style camouflage fatigues and work boots, and his wife confirmed that those did not belong to David. So why was he wearing them, and who did they belong to? Adding to the creepiness of this case is the fact that when David was walking down the middle of the road that night, he wasn't wearing his glasses. They were in his pocket. David couldn't see without his glasses, like, at all. So it's just odd that they were in his pocket, yet he didn't have them on. But this would explain why he looked disoriented walking down the road that night, though. But none of this explains how or why he ended up 1,600 miles away wearing clothes that weren't his, and why he was just willingly walking down the middle of the highway at night. His family believes that he was abducted somehow, while others believe that his career as a judge and lawyer may have had something to do with this. But it's now been 31 years, and whatever happened to David that night remains a mystery. And although we don't know what really happened to him, I think we can all agree that whatever it was sinister.
Shoved in an oven, tied up with a box of spiders, and forced to eat dog food. There's a reason that this case is called the Beastie House case. There's really not much I struggle to research anymore after doing so many of these cases, but this one was a struggle. It was 2012 in a ground floor flat in Glasgow. Neighbours of this flat would notice what they described as an endless stream of substance addicts going in and out of the residence. They could never have imagined the horrors that were going on in the property behind closed doors, and that the victims were all children. Now, the nightmare only came to light on the 21st of March 2020, when a young girl in foster care experienced a horrific nightmare one evening. She was screaming, "Get me out, get me out." The foster carer spoke to the child, and what she disclosed to him would end up unearthing one of Scotland's biggest CSA rings. Now, several children were rescued from the flat, which was described as rancid. The horrors that went on there included attempted murder, violence, SA, and R. Now, on that particular evening that I was describing, the 21st of March, 2 more children sat down with the man and his wife and told them the nightmare that they'd been living. When the children had escaped the Beastie House, they were pencil thin and absolutely covered in head lice. One girl told the foster family how she was locked in a cupboard regularly with a box full of spiders. She would scream and kick the door to try and get free, while a group of H addicts laughed and watched on. Due to how infested the flat was with the bugs, the children nicknamed it the Beastie House. The abusers in this case were Ian Owens, 45, Elaine Lannery, 39, Leslie Williams, 42, Paul Brannan, 41, Scott Forbes, 50, Barry Watson, 47, and John Clark, 49. What these monsters did to these children behind closed doors was absolutely abhorrent. One child was put in an oven and had the door closed behind her. She was also then locked in a fridge and also kept in the freezer after the trays were taken out. Another child that was in this flat tried to help her by adjusting the temperature so it wasn't as cold. She was also hung by her clothes from a nail in the kitchen for up to 10 minutes. The gang forced her to eat dog food, which made her vomit. As if this wasn't all horrific enough, the gang SA'd the children and filmed it and uploaded it. They called these nights R nights and would take substances and R the children. All of the victims were under the age of 13. One was still young enough to be wearing nappies. The children were viciously beaten, punched and hit with pots and pans until they were knocked unconscious. They were forced to drink alcohol and substances, and one boy described sniffing something that he said made him feel weird and dizzy. The children were also sometimes made to deliver substances to other substance addicts. Multiple accused gang members were actually found dead before the trial even took place, one dying from a stroke and the others from substances. The gang were given sentences ranging from 20 years to just 8 years. Now, the children, thankfully, are receiving extensive support to rebuild their lives, and their bravery is hoped to inspire other victims of abuse to come forward. If you ever see anything or hear about anything or even just hear rumours, please do make sure that you always report it to police, especially if it involves a child. Also, if you've ever been a victim of anything like this, please do come forward, tell somebody. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. There could still be people involved or people that we can bring to justice, and there could also obviously be potential other victims.
The last thing she ever said to her family was that her boyfriend was either going to propose to her or kill her. In 2005, 20-year-old Rhonda Casto's mother introduced her to a man that she thought would be a great fit for her daughter. And that man was Stephen Nichols. Stephen seemed great and nice. He was successful and also recently divorced. And when Stephen met Rhonda, he was instantly smitten because Rhonda was beautiful, she was a model, but she was also quite younger than him. Rhonda was 20 years old and Steve was in his 30s. And when the two started dating, things got really serious really fast. Steve would absolutely shower Rhonda in gifts. The two moved in together and eventually had a daughter together. Steve would say that the relationship was great, that Rhonda desperately wanted to marry him, that the two of them looked at rings already and planned to get married that summer. But those closest to Rhonda told a very different story. Rhonda's family and friends said that Rhonda was very unhappy and she was thinking of ending things with Stephen. She felt like she had no control over her life, that her relationship with Stephen was toxic. They were always fighting and that Stephen had even become abusive. Rhonda even took a photo to show her loved ones of all the bruises down her back from Stephen pushing her down the stairs. On March 16th, 2009, Rhonda and Steve's young daughter was with Rhonda's mom because the couple planned on going on a hike. It was a hike in this very beautiful area of Oregon called Eagle Creek. But before they left, Rhonda told her mom that on that hike, Steve was either going to propose to her or he was going to kill her. Like I said, the place that they were going to go on this hike was very beautiful, but it was also quite dangerous. The trails were very narrow and they were right next to very steep, high cliffs. During the hike, Steve said that it started to rain, so he suggested that him and Rhonda go back, but that Rhonda started acting really weird. That Rhonda draped a towel around her shoulders and started running around screaming that she was Superwoman. Rhonda was just running around screaming that she's Superwoman, but she's running so fast on these narrow trails and it started to get wet from the rain, and Rhonda slipped and fell off the 100-foot cliff. Stephen claimed that he hiked all the way down to where Rhonda's body was, and then he spent about an hour trying to give her CPR until he realized that it was no use, that she was gone, and then he fell asleep on her body. When he woke up, he hiked all the way back to his car, and only then did Stephen attempt to call 911.
Hello, I need help. I'm at Eagle Creek.
Okay, and what's going on there?
My girlfriend saw off the cliff, and I hiked back. I'm in my car.
You're at the Eagle Creek trailhead right now?
Yeah.
When police arrived, there were a lot of immediate red flags. Stephen was showing no emotion, and he was only concerned with how cold he was. He was being completely uncooperative with police that were trying to find Rhonda's body, and he would only talk about how cold he was and that he thought that he had hypothermia, which he did not. Police eventually did find Rhonda's body, and she was tragically dead at only 23 years old, and it became suspiciously clear that no one had hiked down to her body before the police got there. Steve never went down to her body, and he never attempted to give her CPR. He lied about absolutely everything. And Rhonda's family immediately started pointing fingers at Stephen, believing that he pushed Rhonda off that cliff. And only 10 days after Rhonda passed away, Stephen tried to get his hands on her life insurance policy. Two weren't even married, and only a few weeks before Rhonda died, Steve took out a $1 million life insurance policy on Rhonda. So suspicious. What 23-year-old has a $1 million life insurance policy? The police start looking into Stephen's background, and they find out that his ex-wife filed like a bunch of police reports against him for domestic violence, including one count where Stephen's ex-wife claims that Stephen tried to push her off their apartment balcony. So you have Rhonda, who says that Steve pushed her down a flight of stairs. You have his ex-wife, who says that Steve tried to push her off their apartment balcony. It's seeming more and more likely that Steve is the exact kind of guy that would push someone off of a cliff. And then Rhonda's mom came forward with some information that shocked everyone. Rhonda's mother said that Rhonda's younger sister, before any of this happened, before Rhonda passed away, told her that she had been sleeping with Stephen. And this would have happened when Rhonda's younger sister was 15 years old and Rhonda's boyfriend Steve was 34. And Rhonda's mother actually said that at first she didn't believe her younger daughter. She thought that her younger daughter was making this up to try and like break up Rhonda and Stephen out of jealousy. And she only came forward with this information after Rhonda died. Which is so crazy because I could never imagine not believing my daughter if she said that something happened to her. But even crazier, Steven didn't even try to deny it. Steven confessed that he had been sleeping with his girlfriend and the mother of his child's underage sister. Sadly, years would go by and this case would go cold because there just wasn't concrete evidence to prove that Steven was guilty. But of course, everyone thought that he was guilty, especially Rhonda's loved ones. And to escape the scrutiny, Steve moved to China with him and Rhonda's daughter. He also refused to allow anyone from Rhonda's family to see her very young daughter. And I'm shocked he even was allowed to have custody of her at this time, because this is after he admitted to statutory SA. In 2014, Rhonda's case was reopened and they actually tricked Steven to come back to America with his daughter because they were going to try and arrest him. They just couldn't let this case go cold forever and they were going to try and get Rhonda justice, and they charged him with first-degree murder and statutory SA charges. The prosecution actually did multiple tests with like dummies that were the same weight and height as Rhonda and took it to that cliff and like pushed it off or like had it fall off, and determined that Rhonda had to have been pushed and pushed hard off of that cliff for her body to have been found where it was. But sadly, this was not enough to sway the judge, and the judge determined that there just wasn't enough evidence to find Steven guilty, and they suggested that the prosecution offer Steven a plea deal. Steven pled guilty to lesser charges of negligent homicide and third-degree SA charges. He is a registered SA offender, but he only received 14 months in prison as a sentence. But at this point, he had already served time awaiting trial, so Steven was released on time served. Steve's parental rights of him and Rhonda's daughter were terminated, and Rhonda's daughter will get her life insurance policy when she turns 18. But this case is very sad, very controversial, because a majority of people do believe that Steve got away with the murder of 23-year-old Rhonda Casto. I'm definitely interested to get your guys' opinions on this case, even though I'm pretty sure I know which way they're gonna lie. But definitely leave me all your thoughts, theories in the comment section. Until then, I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next time.
I don't know how people are surprised by the Gino D'Acampo allegations. When I made a video about him spending time in prison, I got absolutely destroyed by all of the Facebook Karens. So it's no surprise to me that Gino D'Acampo has got a dark criminal past. Loads of people in the UK seem to absolutely love Gino D'Acampo until obviously very recently when a bunch of new allegations came out about him. He does still have some very die-hard fans though. So let's talk about the recent allegations and why Gino went to prison. I do actually own a Gino D'Acampo toaster from Asda, so after this video I might be looking for toaster recommendations. In 1998, way before ever appearing on ITV's This Morning, Gino was 21 years old. He was an unknown waiter living in North London. Someone who was very, very well known back in those days was an 80s singer called Paul Young. Now, he was a really popular artist who had hits such as Wherever I Lay My Hat. Gino, apparently struggling for money at the time, broke into Paul Young's house and stole his treasured guitar collection, which was reportedly worth over £4,000, which was obviously a lot more in today's money. He also stole his platinum disc, which was literally irreplaceable. Police investigating the crime actually found that Gino had unknowingly left his DNA at the crime scene in the form of a cigarette butt. They were able to match the DNA off the cigarette to Gino, which in my opinion is just such an embarrassing way to get caught. Gino was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Now, Gino actually reached out to Paul to personally apologise to him conveniently just prior to entering the I'm a Celebrity jungle back in 2009. Gino stated that he was involved with the wrong people and was on the wrong path back then. However, he's now facing fresh allegations about inappropriate behaviour at work. So these are just allegations that I have found online. One woman came forward to report an alleged incident during a 2011 magazine shoot. She stated that he stated in front of the crew he would like to turn me over and F me up the A against the kitchen counter. This woman alleges that she was shocked that no one said anything or told him to stop. Another woman reported an alleged incident where he opened the door in his boxer shorts and nothing else and made reference to his genitalia. He said, "Oh, don't worry, it's only small," she alleges. A former co-worker alleged that he confronted a young crew member over ice cream in 2019. He allegedly stated, "If you don't get me a cornetto, I will F your girlfriend." In 2018, he allegedly made a comment about a female co-worker's chest, saying, "Shouldn't we be talking about her, T? They're perfect like a mouthful." A woman also came forward to allege that he made vile sexual comments about Holly Willoughby. A number of other women accused the chef of behaviour that they called, quote, "distressing and horrendous," end quote. Gino has denied all of the allegations and is said to be mortified.
So chances are you've already seen this clip. I've been asked to talk about this almost every single day, and this is probably one of the most shocking, horrific, and disturbing cases that happened in the last handful of years.
Okay, so parents have some concerns of some stuff they may have found in your room?
Yeah, I believe so.
And what would it be?
A human head and hands.
Well, the man in that clip is 19-year-old Brian Cohey Jr., and his mom just found a severed human head in his closet. This case takes us to Grand Junction, Colorado. At a very young age, Brian was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. He was always getting in trouble at school because he would always say really inappropriate things. He had this like dark, edgy humor, and he was always picking fights with his classmates. Brian's teachers would openly talk about that if any student was ever going to bring a weapon into school, that it would be him. During Brian's junior year of high school, his parents were told that the other students did not feel safe around him. In 2018, he was arrested for assaulting another classmate with homemade mace, and in 2019, he was suspended twice, once for saying some really inappropriate things to some female classmates, and another time for inciting a panic attack in another student that Brian knew was suffering with PTSD. Brian also had an obsession with everything dark, disturbing, and morbid, especially serial killers, and especially Jeffrey Dahmer. Brian's parents were also told by his doctor that he should be evaluated because he potentially had some kind of psychosis, but as far as I know, his parents never actually had him evaluated. And then on the evening of February 28th, 2021, Brian accidentally drove his car into the Colorado River, and for help he called his parents, who called the police. Brian told the police that he parked his car at the boat ramp because he was trying to sit there and like think and clear his head, but his car accidentally rolled into the river. Brian went home, but his parents stayed behind as the tow truck pulled the car out of the river, and this is where things get a little suspicious. There appeared to be something that looked like blood on the back of the car, and in Brian's car was a wallet that did not belong to Brian. And when his parents asked him about this, he said he had no idea anything about the blood, he had no idea what they were talking about, but the wallet he actually found at the river that night, and he took it because he was going to try and return it. And that wallet belonged to this homeless man named Warren Barnes, and the very next day, Warren would be reported missing. Warren may not have had a home, but he was a well-known and well-liked man in his community. All the local businesses knew and loved Warren. He would always do like odd jobs for all the local businesses in the community, and in return, the local business owners would give him food, water, shelter, and money sometimes. Warren was also a creature of habit. He did the exact same thing every day. So a day wouldn't go by that like all his friends at these local businesses wouldn't see him. People would also always see him sitting on the sidewalk reading a book because Warren loved to read. People actually would call him the reading man if they didn't know his name. So when no one had seen Warren for about 36 hours, everyone was immediately concerned. And it was actually this woman named Monique who owned a local bridal shop in town that was the one that reported him missing. And in the meantime, Brian Cohey's parents were getting more and more suspicious of their son. First, there was blood on his car that he had no explanation for. Then they found a wallet in his car that belonged to a man that has now been reported missing. So after Brian left, his mother actually went to his room to like snoop around, and I don't know what she was expecting to find, but I doubt she was ever expecting to find a human head in her 19-year-old son's closet. Brian's parents immediately call him, have him come home. They called the police, and when the police talk to Brian, he doesn't try to hide what he did at all. He immediately confesses. Brian told the police that for a really long time he wanted to know what it would be like to kill someone. He thought that it would be the greatest feeling in the entire world, and he was often driving around at night looking for a potential victim, and that's what he was doing on February 27th when he saw Warren Barnes sleeping under the local bridge. So Brian says he pulled over, he put on a Michael Myers mask, and then attacked Warren as he slept with a sharp weapon. It was an awful, brutal attack, and Warren never saw it coming. And then afterwards, Brian took Warren's head and hands, loaded the rest of his body in his car so he could take it to the Colorado River and dump it in the river. But as he was doing that, his car accidentally rolled into the river, and you know the rest of the story. During Brian's interrogation, he acted very calm. He acted like he had no remorse, no guilt, nothing. He spoke about what he did in great detail without a care in the world, like it was any other day. Like he was telling you about what he did over the weekend. And he even said something along the lines of, why should I care? I killed someone, I got caught, what, I'm gonna get like 15 years in prison? Brian also told the police that he wanted a homeless victim because he did not think that they would be missed and they would not be reported missing, and that could not be farther from the truth. 69-year-old Warren Barnes was reported missing less than 2 days after he was killed, and his death devastated his community. His loss was felt by so many people, and his community actually came together to create a memorial for Warren, and that memorial can be found outside of Monique's bridal shop, who was the woman that actually reported him missing. At Brian's trial, he pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but he was found guilty of all charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and still he showed like no emotion, no remorse, no guilt at all. He only felt bad for himself, saying, this sucks because now I can't hang out with my friends, I can't play video games, and I can't go on the internet anymore. If you watched to end this video, like always, thank you guys so much, and thank you for listening to Warren Barnes' story. Let me know if you'd ever heard this case before, if you had seen that clip. In the comments, let me know what case you want to see me cover next, and until then, love you guys so much. I hope you guys have such a great rest of your weekend, and go Chiefs.
The fact that 64 years ago, an eerily similar plane crash happened just like the one Wednesday in DC, which ended the lives of the entire US figure skating team, is genuinely so horrifying and heartbreaking. On February 15th, 1961, 72 people were killed on Sabena Flight 548 after the Boeing plane they were on crashed while trying to land at the Brussels airport in Belgium. The crash killed all 18 members of the US figure skating team who were on their way to the 1961 World Figure Skating Championships. Also killed in the crash were 16 judges in the competition, as well as family members of the skaters. What's really strange though is that shortly after the plane crash on Wednesday in DC, which also just so happened to be carrying 14 members of the figure skating community, the Brussels airport in Belgium, which was the site of the 1961 plane crash, experienced a technical glitch. Brussels airport confirmed that this glitch made it to where no planes were allowed to fly in Belgium. It was that serious. After investigating, it was found that the glitch at the airport was due to the failure of the main radar of the Air Traffic Safety Control Center. But it's insane to me that this exact airport that experienced a horrific plane crash in 1961, where the entire US figure skating team perished, had a glitch shortly after the DC crash, which killed 14 figure skaters. It's absolutely devastating, but it did make me look more into the 1961 crash, and this is what I found. So on February 15th, 1961, the Boeing plane carrying 72 people took off from the Idlewild Airport in New York City, and they were supposed to be flying into Brussels Airport in Belgium for the World Figure Skating Championships. No difficulties were reported during the 8-hour flight, and it seemed like everything was totally normal. But about 20 minutes before trying to land on the runway, the flight crew lost all radio contact with Brussels Airport. As Flight 548 was trying to land, the pilots saw a small plane still on the runway, so they had to cancel their approach. They ended up circling the airport 3 times in total while waiting for the small plane to move in order to descend onto the runway. But during the last trip around the airport, something malfunctioned. The pilots were then seen fighting for control of the plane, and after it climbed about 1,500 feet, it spiraled, essentially nosediving straight into the ground. This caused the plane to explode on impact, killing all 72 people aboard and 1 person who was on the ground, and all of this took place less than 2 miles from Brussels Airport. The exact cause of the crash has never been determined, but the FAA stated that the most likely cause was that the tail stabilizer adjusting mechanism had failed, and like I said, all 18 members of the figure skating team, as well as 16 judges and their family members, had all perished, along with the rest of the people on the flight. This included 11 crew members and 2 pilots, who were both former military pilots. What's crazy is that the organizers of the World Figure Skating Championships were initially going to continue with the event, despite the entire US team being killed along with some of the judges. But after hosting a poll, voters elected to cancel the event, which I'm thankful they did because that would have been outrageous to continue after something like that. The Sabena Flight 548 disaster ended up prompting US figure skating executives to issue a mandate that still exists today. It says that no team traveling to an international competition is permitted to fly together. The news of this recent plane crash in DC that that took the lives of 14 young figure skaters has brought back horrible memories for the figure skating community, and it's giving them a disturbing sense of deja vu. On Wednesday night, 67 people died after the flight they were on, which was an American Airlines flight, collided with an Army helicopter in Washington, D.C. It was a flight from Wichita, Kansas, and it was carrying 14 members of the figure skating community and their families returning home from a training camp. This crash happened over the Potomac River in D.C., and as of today, roughly 40 bodies have been pulled from the river and recovered. Last night, it was reported that investigators recovered 2 black boxes from the plane, which they're hoping will provide more clues as to what happened, because as of right now, the cause of the crash is still unclear. When something like this happens, it's more devastating than anyone can put into words, because you not only lose an entire generation of future Olympians in a split second, but when you lose coaches like this, you lose the future of the sport too. And members of the community still talk about what happened in 1961, so for it to happen again is just unthinkable. I can't stop thinking about the fact that they were 20 minutes away from landing. Literally 20 minutes. It's crazy to think that in the blink of an eye, their life on Earth just ended so suddenly. I just hope that it was instant for them and that they didn't even know what was happening. Our life is so incredibly temporary, and this is a devastating reminder of that.
This is the case of the identical twins. One was found dead at the bottom of a cliff, and the other was arrested for her twins' murder. If you haven't seen it already, the newest episode of my podcast, Hot on the Case, is out right now. There's a video version and an audio version. If you like my videos here, you'll love my videos there, so go check it out. The identical twins in today's story, Allison and Anne, were always very, very close, but almost too close. They were very codependent. They did everything together. They even showered together. They just could not be apart from each other. People actually said it was like they had one soul separated into 2 bodies and that they could quite literally read each other's minds. But the codependent relationship between the twins could also be really dark, twisted, and violent. The 2 would constantly fight, and it would get really physical and violent. The 2 actually ended up opening their own yoga studio together in Palm Beach, Florida, and it was very successful, which is why they're known as the Yoga Twins. The twins actually got so popular that they were offered their own yoga twin reality TV show, and they wanted to get a new, bigger, nicer, and fancier yoga studio for the TV show, but then the TV show actually never ended up happening. So now the twins had this big fancy yoga studio that they couldn't afford. They actually ended up shutting down the yoga studio very abruptly and in a very shady way, without paying their employees for that month or refunding people's memberships for that time period. They were actually so hated in Palm Beach that the twins left town due to the scrutiny and moved to Utah. But there was so much bad publicity tied to their names. They even had snark pages made about them on the internet that they ended up changing their names. So now Allison was Alexandra Duvall and Anne was Anastasia Duvall. In Utah, the twins tried to open up another yoga studio, but that one flopped and it went under very quickly. They were in so much debt, they had to file for bankruptcy, and they were under so much stress that both twins developed a drinking problem. They started drinking a lot. Now they're adding a bunch of alcohol into an already toxic, violent, codependent relationship between the 2 twins. Alexandra actually got a DUI in Utah. She posted bail and then fled the state. The twins decided to move to Hawaii. On May 29th, 2016, Anastasia had planned a camping trip with her new boyfriend named Federico, and her twin sister Alexandra kind of decided to invite herself and tag along on their couple camping trip last minute. And Federico was actually trying to help his girlfriend Anastasia stop drinking, so this was actually an alcohol-free camping trip, but Alexandra snuck some in. They actually weren't even at the camping spot for very long. Federico left for a second, turned around, and realized that the twins were gone and they had taken his car. The twins were actually driving on the very notorious highway, the road to Hana, which is a very beautiful road, but it's actually quite dangerous because it's very twisty, turny, narrow, and on the side of a cliff. People driving around next to them saw the twins fighting in the car, punching each other, pulling each other's hair, and slapping each other. And they're doing this while driving on this super dangerous road. And then those witnesses saw the car take a sharp turn left and accelerate off the side of the cliff. Alexandra, who was driving, walked away with only minor injuries. She survived, but her twin sister Anastasia was tragically dead at the scene. So the police are trying to figure out what happened here. They have all these witnesses saying that they saw the twins fighting in the car, and then the car just suddenly drove off the cliff. And then they realized that there's a bunch of like tire marks, like skid marks on the road that were consistent with someone accelerating off of the cliff. There were no signs that they tried to brake or slow down or anything. And Alexandra was showing no emotion, even though she just drove off a cliff and her twin sister was dead. Alexandra, who was the one to drive off the cliff, had a blood alcohol level of 3 times the legal limit at the time of the crash, so clearly very intoxicated. Was this a drunk driving accident or a murder? Did she purposefully try to drive off that cliff to kill her sister? Anastasia's boyfriend, Federico, who was actually on that camping trip with the twins, said that he didn't seem shocked that something like this happened. He said that him and Anastasia were trying to actually like plan their own life together, separate from Alexandra. Anastasia wanted to quit drinking, move away, and start a life and a business with Federico, and this made Alexandra furious. That the week before the crash, Federico said that he heard Alexandra say that she wanted to kill her sister. And this is really weird, but before the crash ever even happened, Alexandra would tell people, "I killed my sister," like it already happened. Federico also said that after his girlfriend Anastasia died, her twin sister Alexandra started to wear her clothes. She tried to come on to him and even tried to get in the shower with him, like she was trying to take over Anastasia's life. The twins' own father actually said that it should have been the other twin, that the wrong twin died. And like almost immediately after the crash, Alexandra was arrested for another DUI. She was like swerving on the road and almost hit a bunch of pedestrians, and once again she was over 3 times the legal limit. And this is right after she was in this terrible traumatic car accident where her sister died. Eventually, Alexandra was arrested for the second-degree murder of her sister, and her defense actually tried to argue that Anastasia, the sister that passed away in the crash, was actually the one that caused the crash because she was fighting with her sister who was driving and pulling at her hair, and that's what caused her to drive off the cliff. The judge actually ended up finding that there wasn't enough evidence to convict Alexandra beyond a reasonable doubt, so he found her not guilty and released her. I'm sorry, she was 3 times the legal limit. We couldn't even have convicted her of like vehicular manslaughter. Alexandra Duvall is out free right now, and there's a lot of people that think that she got away with the murder of her twin sister, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think she got away with murder? Do you think that she was also attempting to try and take both of their lives when she drove off that cliff? Or do you think it just was a terrible, terrible accident? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time in my next video.
The abduction and murder of Sierra Joggin is a case that will forever scare me, not only because of the way she was found, but because it uncovered a barn of horrors in a small community owned by a local man with a history of abducting women, and the fact that this could have all been prevented had this sick man stayed in prison like he was supposed to. Sierra Joggin was 20 years old when she mysteriously disappeared on July 19th, 2016. She was on summer break from the University of Toledo and was staying with her parents at their home on County Road 6 in Metamora, Ohio. That evening, Sierra was at her boyfriend Josh's house, not super far away, when she decided that she should probably start heading home. So at around 6:45 p.m., Sierra left on her purple bicycle with Josh riding alongside her on his motorcycle. He wanted to make sure that she got home safe, even though it really wasn't that far away. But once they got on to County Road 6, Sierra insisted that she would be okay to ride the rest of the way home alone and told him to go home. So Josh kissed her and told her he loved her, and also told her to text him once she got home. But Sierra never made it home, and this was the last time she was ever seen alive. Later that night, when she failed to return home, and after Josh realized he couldn't get a hold of her on the phone, Sierra was reported missing to the police. As it was getting dark out, police made a terrifying discovery. Not even a mile away from her home, police found Sierra's bike deep inside of a cornfield just off of County Road 6, not far from where she was last seen by her boyfriend. Surrounding her bike were a ton of items that didn't belong to her, including a pair of men's sunglasses, a screwdriver, and a set of fuse boxes. Investigators described the scene as really eerie, and it made the hair on the back of their necks stand up, because not only did they find these odd items, but they also found signs of a massive struggle. They found motorcycle tracks through the cornfield, as well as broken corn stalks, but they also found corn stalks that were covered in blood. Police immediately closed down the road because this was a clear abduction, and they quickly brought in the FBI for assistance. Together, they tried tracking her location through her Fitbit and her phone, and it did provide them with a ping several miles away from where her bike was found. But this didn't prove to be a good lead because they still couldn't locate Sierra. One thing that they did find nearby, though, is incredibly disturbing, and it was a helmet with a bloody handprint on it. A Authorities then started focusing on her boyfriend Josh, not only because he was the last person to be with her before she disappeared, but also because he was riding his motorcycle that day, and police did find motorcycle tracks in the cornfield. But police were able to quickly rule him out based on evidence found at the crime scene, specifically his helmet that he had with him, which obviously wasn't the one used in Sierra's abduction. That and the fact that he was super cooperative and allowed them to search whatever they needed, and Sierra's family even said that Josh would never hurt her. So then a massive search was launched involving local authorities and the FBI, and everyone was pretty focused on the cornfields, but police also started knocking on doors in the neighborhood to see if anyone heard or saw anything. Police specifically wanted to knock on the home of James Worley, who also lived on County Road 6, just like Sierra. In fact, they pretty much lived right down the road from each other. They said they kind of just had this hunch to knock on his door, and when he answered, he immediately began acting suspicious. James started oversharing a bunch of really self-incriminating details, like how he was riding his motorcycle that day in the same area, but it had broken down in the cornfield. Then James started listing off several items that he just so happened to lose in the cornfield, which included some sunglasses, a screwdriver, and, you guessed it, some fuse boxes. This kind of made the detective's jaw drop, because at this point in time, none of that information had been released to the public. So the fact that he just blatantly said that, it seemed pretty clear that he was involved. James also told authorities that when he had broken down out there in the cornfield, he found 2 bikes and decided to take one, which would explain why his fingerprints are probably on them. He then looks them in the eyes and says, quote, "I didn't steal anything or kill anyone." End quote. So because of how sinister that entire encounter was, police decided to run a background check on James, and what they found is horrifying. In July of 1990, James was arrested and convicted for the assault and abduction of another woman named Robin Gardner. The circumstances surrounding that case are eerily similar to Sierra's. That day, Robin was riding her bike when James ambushed her and hit her with his truck. He then got out, struck her over the head, and put her in handcuffs. He then held a screwdriver to her neck, telling her that he would kill her if she screamed. As he was trying to force her into his truck, Robin somehow luckily escaped. He was arrested and charged with her abduction and sentenced to possibly 10 years in prison, but he was released early after just 3 years, and he was actually released because he petitioned himself. He then went to prison again in 2000 for drug and firearm charges, but again, he was released early due to his own petition. After this, he was put in mandated therapy, and in one session, he told his therapist that he had learned from each abduction that he had done, and the next one he was going to bury. So this was definitely enough information to begin searching James' property, and on his property, police found a barn that would later become known as the Barn of Horrors. Inside the barn, police found a big green chest with a bunch of women's underwear in it, some of which were bloody. They also found restraints and a carpet-lined freezer that was stained with blood that he had buried on his property. Police then found blood on his motorcycle and zip tie restraints and a ski mask in his truck. Sierra was nowhere to be found, but they did find an overwhelming amount of her DNA on a piece of duct tape and an air mattress in his barn. And adding to the creepiness is the fact that his property was literally plastered with recording devices. After checking his phone records and seeing that it placed him at the crime scene for 2 hours during the time that Sierra was missing, James was officially arrested. He was arrested on abduction charges, but at this point, Sierra was still missing, so all hope was that she would be found alive somewhere soon. But sadly, 3 days after she was reported missing, her body would be found buried in a shallow grave in a field just off of County Road 7. This was only a few miles away from James' property. She had been hogtied and had a large plastic toy shoved so far into her mouth as a gag that it broke her teeth. She was also found to be wearing an adult diaper. Sierra's official cause of death was asphyxiation caused by the large plastic toy, but there was no evidence of any SA. James was indicted on 19 counts for charges like aggravated murder and kidnapping, in which he pleaded not guilty. At the trial, it was revealed that he had been watching some pretty bad porn related to what he ended up doing to Sierra up until he committed the crime. It was found that James had passed Sierra on the road that day as she was riding her bike, and then during a crime of opportunity, he hid in the cornfield a little ways up the road and then attacked her as she rode by. He then struck her in the head with his helmet, knocking her unconscious. He then dragged her into the corn and waited until it was dark. Meanwhile, he called his brother to make up a fake story about his motorcycle breaking down, but little did his brother know that Sierra was fighting for her life right next to James while he was on the phone. He then rode his motorcycle home, drove back in a white van where he picked her up, and then took her back to his barn where he eventually killed her. One of the key pieces of evidence in this case, outside of the DNA, was a witness who had seen a white van speeding down that road the night of the abduction. It was reportedly speeding so much that the witness got a license plate number, which was found to be registered to James. His defense argued that all of the sexual things found in James' barn were props and part of a corn studio that he had planned to start. They said that although he did have a fetish disorder, he wasn't responsible for the murder of Sierra. Ultimately, with overwhelming amounts of both Sierra's and James' DNA found at the abduction site, as well as rifles in his barn, paired with his phone records putting him at the crime scene, James was found guilty and sentenced to death. His current execution date is set for May 20th of this year. A big reason that he got that ruling is because his former abduction victim, Robin Gardner, spoke at his trial. She said that she knew deep down that she needed to be Sierra's voice because she is no longer here, and she knew that fear all too well. The only good thing that has come out of this is Sierra's law, which was started by her family in Sierra's honor. This law has created a violent offender database that is easily accessible to not just law enforcement, but to the public as well. This allows you to see if there are any violent offenders living in your neighborhood, which is extremely important because had this been around when Sierra was abducted, maybe things would have been different. At the time, even though James was a violent offender and had kidnapped women before, he wasn't in any state or federal offender databases. James was found to fit the profile of a serial offender, and police and even his own family believe that he could possibly have more victims. His family suspects him of killing at least 2 other women, but their remains have yet to be found. So as of today, he's never been officially charged with anything else. But this does make sense because in 2020, the FBI searched his property again. This time they brought in excavation equipment and dug everything up. This wasn't related to Sierra's case, so it makes me wonder what exactly they were looking for and if they ever found anything. Sierra's story is one that I will never be able to forget because it 100% could have been prevented.
Have you ever felt suspicious of someone in a crime case but then almost felt guilty for feeling suspicious about them? The husband in this case faced a lot of heat after his wife was murdered. He was saying some questionable things to the media and people felt like he was guilty. We now know once and for all who was responsible. It was the 13th of August in 1981 in Bedfordshire in England. 36-year-old Carol Morgan was a mother of 2 living in the area with her husband Alan. The pair ran a convenience store on a council estate in Linslade together, and most people regarded them as a normal, decent couple. On the day in question, Alan called the police to claim that he found his wife's deceased body in the storeroom of their shop. He was described as being confused and jumbled on the phone, but not particularly devastated. Now, people react in different ways to trauma, and it could have simply been that he was in shock upon finding his wife's dead body. The murder sent absolute shockwaves through the local community who had just never experienced anything like this. Carol had been the victim of what officers called a gruesome and frenzied attack, and who could be responsible was a mystery for decades. Alan was an obvious suspect as the victim's husband. Usually, police will always look to the people closest to the victim. But he was interviewed and apparently had a rock-solid alibi for that evening. He told the police that he'd taken the 2 children to the Odeon cinema that evening in Luton while his wife stayed behind and worked at the shop. So officers were kind of working on the theory that this was most likely to be a burglary gone wrong. £435 in cash, which was a lot of money back then, and some cigarettes were stolen, but a suspect was frustratingly never found. Rumours in the area started circulating about Alan, and some were concerned that he didn't seem to be the kind of grieving husband that they were expecting him to be. He responded by doing some interviews to the local press, and one headline read, "Victim's husband sickened by gossip." In the interview, Alan strangely admitted to being a bit of a womanizer, which is just such an odd thing to say when your wife's been murdered, but does it make him a murderer? No. The interviewer recalled, "When I asked him, 'How do you feel? Your wife has been murdered,' I imagined him to burst into tears. He didn't. He amazingly said, 'I've lost business, I've lost money,' rather than 'I'm devastated, my wife is dead.'" Decades later, a witness proved to be vital. A woman called Jane Bunting was just a teenager when Carol was murdered, but she had some extremely important information to share with the police. In 2018, she came forward to state that Alan had asked her before the murder if her ex-boyfriend knew anyone he could hire to kill his wife. It also came to light that Alan was having an affair at the time of his wife's death with a woman called Margaret Spooner, and that he'd been openly saying to people things such as, "I hate Carol, I don't want to be married to her, I wish she'd die, wouldn't an accident be nice?" He would not only have benefited from the freedom of his wife being deceased, he also would have stood to gain significantly financially. Now, Alan was arrested for having hired a hitman to kill his wife and was found guilty after over 40 years of literally getting away with murder. He was given life in prison, but one important question remains. Who did he hire to actually commit the murder?
Nothing scares me more than when someone goes missing and obviously foul play was involved, but over time, disturbing proof is found that they could still be out there somewhere alive. In this case, a little girl gets abducted from her home in the middle of the night. After multiple sightings of her with unknown people, 911 would receive a frantic phone call a year later claiming to be this little girl. She would scream for help, and a man would be heard yelling at her in the background before the line goes dead. This is what happened to 9-year-old Antoinette Calladito, and that last phone call from her will forever haunt me. In the early morning hours of April 6, 1986, Antoinette would be woken up by a knock on her front door. She lived with her mom Penny and her two sisters Wendy and Sadie in Gallup, New Mexico. Antoinette was described as wise beyond her years. She loved school and Bible studies, and being the oldest, she loved taking care of her two little sisters. So when the knock woke her up that fateful morning, she opened the door, and after doing so, she mysteriously disappeared. That night, Penny was out having fun at a local bar, and all three girls were at home with a babysitter. She got home around midnight, sent the babysitter home, and then went to bed. According to Penny, when she woke up at 7 the next morning to get the girls ready for Bible school, Antoinette was nowhere to be found. After searching everywhere she could think of and talking to all of the neighbors, Penny reported her missing to the Gallup Police Department. I know this was a different time, but it took police 4 days just to officially search Antoinette's home, which is crazy considering the fact that a little girl's life was on the line. Authorities began searching the entire neighborhood, but no trace of Antoinette was found, and it was literally like she vanished into thin air. While police were at the home, a family member brought up a man named Emiliano who went by Emo. It was only then that Penny told police that in the days leading up to Antoinette's disappearance, Emo gave her flowers on 3 separate occasions. From what I can find, Emo wasn't a complete stranger to the family though. Penny's best friend was named Ronald, and I guess Ronald introduced Emo to the family. Not long after this introduction, the two would frequent Antoinette's house and often give her flowers. It's important to note that according to the family, Emo was never at the house without Ronald, but on the night of Antoinette's disappearance, he came alone. He once again brought Antoinette some flowers, and this time he also brought her a bear necklace. This was seen by multiple people who gave the same statements to police after Antoinette disappeared. So this obviously seemed like a good lead, so the police then interviewed Emo, who denied having anything to do with her disappearance. He reportedly took a polygraph test, and although the results are unknown, I'm assuming he must have passed because he was never named a suspect or person of interest. Police then began interviewing neighbors and really anyone in the area that might have any information, and this is when they met a man named Ron Perry. Ron came forward and told police that at around 3:30 the morning Antoinette disappeared, he went to the home and knocked on the front door and window trying to get Penny's attention. I guess the two had gotten into a fight at the bar and he wanted to see if she was okay. I don't know for sure if Penny ever spoke with him or not, but shortly after this he left and stayed the night at a friend's house down the road, and authorities were able to confirm his story by interviewing his friend. Without any leads to go on, Antoinette's case started to go cold, but then a series of possible sightings started to happen that would reignite the case. On April 8th, 1986, just 2 days after Antoinette disappeared, a man reported seeing her on the side of the road in San Antonio. She was wearing a long pink dress and was with a blonde-haired woman. It's never been officially confirmed if that was truly her, but the man was adamant that it was. On April 19th, a woman spotted a suspicious brown truck at a Thriftway gas station. As the truck passed, the woman could hear a little girl screaming, "Help me." And although she didn't actually see the girl, she believes that it could have been Antoinette. Then 2 months later, on June 30th, a man reported seeing Antoinette at a bus depot in El Paso, Texas. He said that she was wearing a long pink dress, which is exactly what the first witness said, but this time she had white shoes on. He also said that the girl had a noticeable mark on her cheek, and Antoinette did have a scar in that exact same place. I think out of all the sightings of her, the 911 call that the Gallup PD would receive a year after Antoinette's disappearance is the most chilling of all. It came out of the blue, and it was of a little girl claiming to be Antoinette. She said she was in Albuquerque, and she's then interrupted by a man screaming, quote, "Who said you could use the phone?" End quote. You can then hear a struggle ensue and the little girl screaming before the line went dead. I'm gonna play the recording now, and it is truly disturbing, so I'd skip this part if you don't want to hear it.
Police Department. Hello. I'm Antoinette Calladito. I'm in Albuquerque. Okay, whereabouts in Albuquerque? Who said you could use a phone? Hello? Antoinette, where are you? Antoinette? Hello?
So keep in mind, this was an entire year after Antoinette's disappearance, and outside of the few possible sightings of her, there had been no leads in her case up until this point. The 911 call was shown to Penny, who confirmed that it was Antoinette speaking, but she didn't recognize the man's voice. Based on this phone call, it really seemed like Antoinette was still alive, but police couldn't trace the call, and her case would soon go cold once again. Then 4 years later, a waitress at a restaurant in Carson City, Nevada reported having a weird interaction with a strange family at one of her tables. According to her, she said she saw a teenage girl matching Antoinette's description to a T, but she was with an unkempt couple. The young girl kept knocking her utensils on the ground, and it seemed as though she was trying to get the waitress's attention. When the waitress would pick up the utensils and give them back to the girl would squeeze her hand really tightly. After the family left, as the waitress was cleaning up their table, she found a napkin with a note on it under the girl's plate. The note read, quote, "Help me, call the police." End quote. By the time authorities were notified, the family was gone and they've never been found or identified. On the 5-year mark of Antoinette's disappearance, police began looking into her case to see if they missed any crucial pieces of information. They decided to re-interview the family, and this is when Antoinette's younger sister, Wendy, who was 5 at the time of her disappearance, dropped a major bombshell on the investigation. Wendy tells police that on the night Antoinette went missing, she actually witnessed her being abducted. She said that someone knocked on the door, and when Antoinette answered and asked who was there, a man responded, "Uncle Joe." She was then grabbed by 2 men, and as she was kicking and screaming to let her go, the men forced her into a brown van and drove away. When asked why she never said anything about this before, Wendy said that she kept this hidden because she didn't see the men's faces and didn't know who they were, and she was also scared that she would upset her mom. She said that she didn't think anyone would believe her because she was only 5 at the time. It was around this time that Penny was re-interviewed by the FBI, and this time, her story changed as well. This time, Penny said that this knock on the door happened around 3:30 that morning, and I'm not sure if this is because she was tired or had been out drinking, but she told Antoinette to go and open the door. Penny then laid there for about 30 minutes waiting for Antoinette to come back, but she never did. And when she got up to look for her and realized she was gone, that's when she knew that she was missing. But the story differs entirely from what she told police back when it happened. The day Antoinette disappeared, she told police that she woke up at 7 a.m. to find her missing, and she never once mentioned anything about making her get up to go answer the door in the middle of the night. So she either lied back then or when she was interviewed 5 years later. Another thing is that she told police that this happened around 3:30 that morning, but if you remember, Ron Perry went to the house and had actually knocked on her door around that time, yet he didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so the timing of this doesn't make sense to me. It's also strange that not a single neighbor or even Penny herself heard Antoinette screaming as she was being abducted that night. I know that some people are heavy sleepers, but it's just weird to me that not one single person heard this happening. According to the FBI report from Penny's interview in 1994, she almost basically confessed to being responsible and planning Antoinette's disappearance. This was from the report, but she goes on to ask the FBI what would happen if she and Emo had something to do with it. She said how Antoinette was starting to be a troublemaker and that she wanted a better life for her, and Emo said that he would be the one to take her. This would kind of make sense to me considering he was grooming Antoinette with all the flowers and necklaces he gave to her. I don't care who you are to the family, a grown man acting that way with a little girl is a major red flag, especially when it's isolated to just one child and not all of the kids. Despite this confession, nothing ever came of it, and Penny was never charged or named an official person of interest in her daughter's disappearance. Authorities do believe that she knew more than she was letting on though, and could have possibly been involved. But Penny died in 1999, and whatever secrets she may have known went with her. Antoinette's dad, who wasn't really in the picture, also died as well in 2012. To this day, it's not known what happened to Antoinette. Some believe that this is a clear case of homicide, while others believe that this was either a random or targeted abduction. Some believe that this could be a human trafficking case, and with all of the sightings of her, as well as that eerie 911 call, this could sadly be a true possibility. I'm not sure if this is related, but I also wanted to add that 3 years after Antoinette disappeared, her 25-year-old aunt also went missing, but she was found alive a month later. I wanted to mention this because there are people who believe that the two cases could be connected. Her family has continued to look for her even today because there is a real possibility that she is out there alive somewhere. But to them and